Welcome to Covered Season 2. Get ready for an amazing set of interviews with business strategists, insurance experts, and wellness professionals in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. The focus this season is to help growing companies build a healthy and safe work environment. We'll cover pressing questions like, what exactly does it cost for a new business to provide health insurance to a team? And if you're a benefits consultant, why is Mountain Health Co-op a first choice for so many businesses in the Rocky Mountain West? If you're ready to take ownership of your business and your benefits knowledge, this is the
Here we
season
are,
for you.
Season 2, Episode 1 of Covered the Podcast. Tim Garden, thank you so much for being here with us. Tim, you have a wealth of experience in Montana health insurance, specifically with Payne West as a benefits health insurance consultant. Can you enlighten our viewers and just give yourself a quick intro for us?
Again, my name's Tim Garden. I've been with Payne West Insurance for 15 years as a benefits broker. Prior to that, I had worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield in their marketing department, working on individual, small group, and Medicare sales. So I've got just about 25 years worth of healthcare experience in my head.
That's a wealth of experience that we're hoping to tap into today. So, Tim, our Season 2 is really focused on group coverage, specifically for business owners who are getting started, who are currently, employing or insuring their employees, but wondering, what is the most important next step for us? So with that in mind, can you walk through, maybe if I'm in my very first steps as a business owner and I'm bringing on my very first employee, what are some important things for that employee to think about, or that business owner to think about?
So when I'm talking with a new business owner that's looking to implement healthcare coverage, first and foremost, we've got to find plans that meet a couple of requirements. One of them, probably the biggest one, is going to be budgetary when it comes to the business, because if it's not affordable, the business owner isn't going to purchase it. So what my intention is, or what my goal is going to be, is to talk with the business owners about how a plan's put together. With the Affordable Care Act, which has been in place since 2014, for small businesses, premiums are already filed with the state of Montana. So there's no real underwriting anymore when it comes to small groups. You're looking at zip codes of the business and primarily the ages of the employees. So as we talk with business owners about that, we're talking about what carriers we have in place. But I've always looked at healthcare as a triangle. You've got 3 points to that triangle. Well, one of them is going to be you, the employer, and your employees. 2 is going to be the carrier that you've got that you're going to use. Mm-hmm. And then 3, access to the network of providers that's available to you. Without all three of those, then a health care plan may not work very well for somebody, because if you've got somebody that lives in a rural area that doesn't have access to a network provider for that carrier, well, it can get to be pretty expensive for an employee. So as we talk about that with employers, we're coming up with different scenarios, and then we're sitting and we're talking about what the responsibilities that the employer has to the employee.
Makes sense to me. And so the very first step that somebody might take is that reach out to...
That would be, to reach out to somebody like me, and we'd sit down and we'd have a conversation like that we have here, because we want to know about what your business is, what you do, what your goals are, because you've got some businesses out there that... their impact in the community is big, so they may be bringing on lots of employees over a short period of time. Well, that's going to transition, because you're going to go from possibly a group of 5 people, and you might be up to 50 in 12 months. Well, now what we've got is there's some scenarios that we've got to run through, because what we want to make sure of is that the employer stays in compliance with the Affordable Care Act. If they're eligible for COBRA, when they become eligible for COBRA, FMLA, and then as you get into that large group market, now you've got the employer mandate when it comes to healthcare.
What is that mandate?
So the
It's if you have over 50 employees, is that right?
Yeah, so if you have more than 50 full-time equivalents, so there's a formula that the government uses when it comes to calculating the number of full-time equivalents that you have. And so if you have more than 50 full-time equivalents over a 12-month period, for example, you most likely are going to be considered a large group. And so now the employer mandate's in place where you've got to have coverage that meets the essential requirement, but also is affordable to the employee. In the small group market, that doesn't matter. And the small group market is going to be from two eligible employees to 50. So in that marketplace, the employer still has some control over their health plan. They control their eligibility, which generally is going to be done by work hours. Your work hours will be anywhere between 20 and 40 hours. Probationary periods for new employees. The Affordable Care Act has put a limit on that. So the maximum probationary period that you can have for new employees is going to be 90 days. So after 90 days, an eligible employee has to be offered that coverage, and then the employee determines whether they're going to enroll or waive the coverage.
Got it.
Is what will happen.
And so some businesses might choose not to insure their employees at all.
Correct.
If you have under 50.
If you have under 50, that is correct.
One of the things that you might talk with employers about is how health insurance, if you're a business owner and you want to recruit the top talent, the A-team players, health insurance seems like a pretty key piece in that puzzle.
Well, it is, because it's part of your all-over benefit package. You still have a salary that you're going to be paying somebody, but what I see, even in the small group market, is you've got people that are going to look for what type of benefits do they offer, but also what the contribution is towards that employee. With healthcare coverage, in the small group market anyway, the employer is responsible for the employee. Okay, that's all the carrier is going to look at. I do have some clients of mine that do pay for dependent coverage as well. That's sort of far and few between. But with the employer having a responsibility to the employee, as we talked about earlier, budgetary item, we got to come up with a contribution strategy when it comes to what they want to offer the employees and the type of package and benefits that they want to provide. So it's going to vary from employer to employer. Not one mold fits everybody and stuff. So we have some employers that pay a percentage, and we have some employers that pay a flat dollar amount. So it's just going to be what fits that need for the employer.
If someone is starting a business, and they're thinking about bringing on their first employee. You mentioned 2 employees. Can they insure themselves and their first employee? And does that count as 2?
It does. Now, one of the things that is happening now that's sort of been implemented over the last 12 months with
April 2020 for our future listeners. Yeah.
For the carriers is, and most groups are going to, or most carriers are going to ask this of groups, but they're going to ask how many owners or partners are there, and is there what you could say a non-common employee? So what carriers are trying to avoid is where you've got 2 partners that want to be insured and that's it. That's not going to happen anymore. So you're going to have a non-common employer that's not an owner, is not a family member, but is either a salaried or a hourly employee, because the carrier is going to be pretty specific with that. So, for example, if you and I own this business here together, well, we'd have to hire somebody else that's not part of our ownership for us to get a small group going.
Okay.
So, in a case like that, then we've got an owner and an employee. That would be considered a small group.
Yeah, that's good to know. Certainly a lot of questions as you're starting a business. Okay, when does it make sense for us to offer health insurance, and can we afford it? So I think that's a big one. And I know this is a tough question and kind of puts you on the spot. But if I were making a business plan for the next 5 years and I said, okay, I'll have 5 employees, ranging in age ranges, obviously, but on average, what should I budget for health insurance for each of those employees, or on average for each of those employees?
Okay, well, let's pull out the crystal ball here.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, you can sort of get an idea with that from the carriers with the rating sheets that they give out, because that's something that we would have access to. So if you're looking at an average age of 30, for example, well, you might think about budgeting anywhere between $350 and maybe $400 per employee for that type of benefit package. But there's more that goes into that, because now with the small group market, you can offer multiple health plans. So you can offer, some carriers will let you offer 3 plans, some will let you offer 4. So when we're looking at those plans, we want to make sure that we got a good mixture for your portfolio. And then you can determine, based on the health plans and the rates that you've got, which one do you want to have a base plan and the others to be a buy-up. But when we look at premiums, because that's a question I get a lot, what do you think it's going to cost?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're like, okay, how much time do you have? How long is this podcast?
Yeah. What algorithm can we use here?
Right.
But you're looking, healthcare costs, they're going to increase. I mean, what we've got a population that's getting older, okay, using more medical services. You've got treatments that, whether they're by medication or by surgery, that people are living much longer. So we're taking healthcare sort of a next level with this. So that's all got to come out of somewhere. And so you've got carriers that are most of the part are footing the bill with that. So you've got to be, so when you're looking at that healthcare coverage, you're just sort of thinking about what type of plans should you offer.
Yeah.
And that's where, with my experience, we can talk about traditional PPO plans or plans that are eligible for health savings accounts and stuff, because there's some financial tools that you've got available to you that you can build your package around that can be really attractive.
Cool. Small business owners, I'm sure, the questions are many, but dental and vision and life, is that something that they would talk to an insurance agent about? Is that something they are kind of set to fend for themselves and figure out? How does that work with the agent business owner relationship?
So the dental coverage, the dental, vision, life, those are ancillary coverages that we could still run through the business, and those are important aspects as well. It seems like more people will go to a dentist before they'll go to a doctor, because when you've got an issue wrong with your tooth and it hurts, you want relief. So the dental plans that are out there are a number of carriers that provide they provide good dental benefits. Unfortunately, it's not like what it is with the medical plan, to where you have sort of an unlimited lifetime maximum with this. A lot of dental plans have cap limits to the services that they provide. Your vision coverage is important as well. There's a lot of when you go in and you have a routine eye exam, whether it's through an optometrist or ophthalmologist, those guys are trained to determine, whether you've got some other ailment based on maybe the pressures that's in your eye. Maybe they see something that they can refer you back to your physician with. Personally, I'm a type 2 diabetic, so I end up seeing an ophthalmologist at least once a year, because I go through the diabetic tests as well when we talk to our vision provider about that. And then with your life insurance, the group term life insurance generally is pretty inexpensive. And I think that's a valuable benefit, because it's not, it's not more or less for the employee, but it's for the employee's family. Because if something happens to that employee, the employer doesn't know whether they have life insurance or what. So those bills will still come due.
Yeah.
And so having that group group term life coverage has always been a great aspect of that. And we've got various carriers that will do that too.
Seems like life insurance is just a nice peace of mind for folks to have. That okay, if something does happen, at least that part of the world is covered. My family or whoever, my bills will be covered for an extended period of time.
You're exactly right. Whether you buy it, whether it's offered through your employer or you go and you purchase it on your own, it's a wise investment.
Yeah.
The one other thing that I'd throw out at you at this time too is going to be since we're talking about some of these ancillary coverages, is you've got there's accident plans that are out there and critical care plans. Some of these accident plans can be really beneficial because, especially if you're an employer with young employees generally think that they're invincible, but they're the ones that have hobbies that are
maybe high risk. Yeah.
And so we've been able to do this, and it's for some of the clients we've been able to put together higher deductible health plans, but on the back end, put in an accident plan for those folks because they are healthy. And so they're not going to see a physician very often, if any, maybe for their preventative or wellness exams, but they're not going to see a physician on a routine basis. But the one thing that they're not anticipating is walking out that door, tripping on the curb and breaking an arm. Well, now, once that's happened, that's a claim that a healthcare plan is going to pay for. But the question I would have is, now, do you have the reserves for that? And that's where some of these ancillary coverages like accident plans could come into place, because they can help an employee pay for those services.
I see. Yeah, those are things that having an agent on your side is certainly the way to go.
Oh, it is. We do our best to make sure that we can limit as much exposure as possible.
Yeah.
The one question I've gotten lately, especially with the COVID pandemic that we have in place, is short-term disability plans. And with a short-term disability plan, it's a plan that's going to actually pay you a paycheck. And so with that disability plan, if you are diagnosed or you've had surgery, for example, and you're going to be off for 4 or 5 weeks, that's where a disability plan is going to come into play, because you may not have enough paid time off earned or sick leave to where you still have bills coming in. Well, that's where these short-term disability plans can come in, and they're not going to make you whole, but they're going to give you a
bit of a buffer, maybe.
They'll give you, generally those mostly are anywhere between 60 and 60% of your paycheck that you're going to receive, and then they're going to work with you to make sure that you can get back to work in a reasonable amount of time. And stuff. So
that matters.
It does. So when it comes to healthcare, we've talked about healthcare coverage, but there's all these little things that sort of come right behind it, because we always look at healthcare as this is the largest thing, and it is, because it's you can get large claims going through there. But when you've got some of these other coverages in place, they can make or break a small business with retaining employees.
Tim, can you talk to us a little bit about, from the small business or the business owner's perspective, when they're presented with all of these plans, it can feel a little bit overwhelming, and not treating health insurance like a commodity, like, oh, well, which one is the lowest, and I'll just go with that one. This is a podcast for the Mountain Health Co-op, and we feel like there's a lot of benefits that come from being member owned. That it is a not-for-profit healthcare. How do you communicate specifically when people ask about, well, what is the co-op all about? What are some things that you let business owners know about Mountain Health Co-op?
Well, so generally what we're going to talk about is the factors that, one, they're a locally owned company out of Helena, which works out really, really well. And the experience that they have, it's in healthcare, it's funny because a lot of the folks that I worked with at Blue Cross Blue Shield, 10 or 15, 20 years ago, they've moved over to other carriers, including the co-op. So those relationships are still there, which from my perspective is very, very good, because I've got somebody that's knowledgeable. They understand what I do. I understand what they do.
They understand Montanans.
They do,
Yeah.
A big factor of any healthcare is going to be, it's going to be customer satisfaction, and it's going to be what I do for the clients that I have, but as well as what the carriers do for their clients. I think the co-op has that. They've got, very, very good customer service. And when we talk about, when we're presenting those types of plans, it's like I said, it goes back to what we talk about with that triangle with every carrier, because you have pros and cons of everything, because you don't want it to be a commodity product. But generally in the small group market, it is, and it's because there's everybody's looking at pricing, but it's looking at the intangibles that are going to be big. Because the last thing an employer wants to do is spend any part of their day having to deal with healthcare questions or issues with their health plan and not get anywhere. And that's where we come into play too, because we try to alleviate that. But there are employers out there that they like to keep control of that, and so they're making these phone calls. And so from that perspective, that's going to be a huge aspect, is how well the customer's treated by any carrier. But excuse me, the co-op, the customer service part of that is going to be is very, very good.
Yeah. It seems too that, if you can have a health insurance for your team that helps them feel safe, secure, like, okay, that part of my world is covered, I can focus more of my part of the world on helping this team grow and helping the company, and focusing on family, and without having to sort of stress or escape brain capacity into, oh man, I hope I don't get hurt because our health coverage is like teetering on the edge of, a $10,000 deductible every time. So I think that peace of mind is really important for a team to function at its sort of highest and highest level.
It is, and this goes back to an employer's perspective is, the employer makes the final decision, but I think you want to have some key employees involved when you're developing or coming up with a strategy for the type of healthcare plan that you want, because the needs of your employees are all going to be different. And that's where the flexibility of having different health plans, to me, is important, because, like I said, you've got young folks that may look at the cheapest plan possible, but then you're going to have guys like me who, they're 50 years old and in good shape, but I'm looking at that going, okay, I can see what I don't want, an extremely high deductible, even though I do consider myself very healthy. I want to limit my exposure, but I'm willing to pay more premium for that as well, and the point being is, you really you want to make sure that the health plan that you're going to put in place for your employees fits everybody's needs, not just the owner or not just one or two employees, but everybody that's there.
Yeah. That's just such a great point about giving your employees a voice in the choice, and letting them say, hey, here's our options, here's some of the costs. Let's walk through this, because it is a decision, and it's a hard decision for everyone to make.
Yeah.
Tim, we're closing in on our final segment, where we ask a couple questions that we try to ask every guest. First and foremost, what do you think is the one piece of advice that you would give to an employer who's looking for the very first time to get started with health insurance?
I guess the one thing I would tell an employer is not just to focus on your bottom line with this. You want to have a benefits broker that's going to work with you and walk you through this.
Yeah.
To a point that you're getting really good sound advice with this, because if there's, I've run into some situations where I didn't agree with what an owner, the type of plans or what they were going to do, though they could, they had every right to do that, and we've sort of stepped back from that. But listen to the consultant that you've got, and coming up with the type of health plan that you want to have in place. That's going to be key, because so many, even now you've got employers that will go out and they will try to find coverage on their own, and they just you're just bombarded with everything, and it's a sink or swim feeling, and you're going to sink.
Yeah.
Because it's the guidance that's out there, and that's exactly what we're designed to do. Is I've got the experience and knowledge in my head that we're going to put you down the right path.
Yeah, I should add that Tim helped our team here at Pintler Group figure all of this out when we're working with the co-op, and we ended up switching to the Mountain Health Co-op, and the experience so far has been really great with them. And certainly I feel like we leaned on you pretty heavily and said, we don't know the answer to this question. What do you see? What would you recommend here? And you were able to provide some really insightful, and without saying, oh, you need to do this, and here's why, because it's a little more expensive, but it always felt really genuine. So thank you.
Oh,
for all of that.
You're welcome. And that's, like I said, that's, you've got the questions you have that you've had for me when we were looking at switching the coverages and so forth, and some of the questions you had your own, I've got from the employees. Yeah, this is how this is going to work. This is what you need to do. And even with the employees, we've, at least with my team at Payne West, and I know all of our other teams at Payne West pretty much do the same thing, but you have access to us for any type, for the questions that you have. If I don't know the answer, then we'll find, we'll go to the carrier and we'll find out, because we'll talk the language
right
of insurance, which can be really difficult.
Yeah, which
to
can
understand.
feel like a foreign language. So
Exactly.
if you're an employer out there and you're still scratching your head and you're thinking, this still sounds really complicated, Tim, how can someone get a hold of you? Where can we find you?
Well, so I can be reached at Payne West Insurance here in Missoula.
Cool. We'll put some info in the show notes.
Okay.
With contact info if that works.
Yep. And I have no problem answering questions for folks. I mean, that's
Totally
one of the, I consider that one of the aspects of what I do, regardless if it's a client of mine or not. Some of the folks I play golf with, for example, they'll throw random questions at me like that as well. And, and it's just stuff that I've got inside my head that, I'll give you a good, honest answer with something like that.
Questions about health insurance, group coverage, Mountain Health Co-op. Tim is a great resource for all things small group, large group, medium group, all of it. So get in touch with him. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. This has been really amazing. I think a lot of business owners, large and small, are going to find tremendous value from this talk. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.